everybody, and thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of Outside the Box. Today, from time to time, if those who've been following me, you know I do special segments called Let's Talk About Relationships. And so we're going to have one of those segments today and talk about relationships. But for today, what I wanted to do in our discussion about relationships is to allow women opportunity to ask men questions about relationships that sometimes we're not able to get honest answers from the people that are as closest to us. And so I'm going to have two guests coming out today to answer those questions, because of course I'm a woman, so I'm not equipped to give women the type of answers that I think we need sometimes. And so I have two special guests. There were supposed to be three, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Before we get started, please make sure that you like, share, invite people to my page, so that, you know, other women can get this information as well. My show Outside the Box aims to help people see that God is bigger than our boxes. And I mean, we definitely need this when it comes to relationships. Like, everything that we do is built on relationships, the foundation of marriages and families. Like, it was one of the first relationships. It was the first relationship that God created on earth. And so it's very, very important that we get insight when it comes to relationships as well. My shows come on Saturdays at 12 p.m. I'm doing them bi-weekly for now until I finish writing my book, which is called God, Why Am I Not Married? 9 Reasons You Might Still Be Single, which should be out sometime this summer. And also, please remember that you can watch me as well on Roku, on the Entertainment Theater app. You can download it on Roku, or you can also watch it online. And I will put the information or links for that below this post. Okay, so I'm going to bring out my guest now, which you guys already know. If you've been following me, once again, Mr. J. Burroughs. I always call you Mr. J. You did. I mean, your name, your aura, your book, it just commands a level of respect that I can't help but to call you Mr. J. So welcome again. We did a show about his book a while back, everybody, the one that's behind him. That was a powerful show. He has a powerful book, so make sure you check that out. And then we also did a show about what it really means to be a Christian, and that was a great show as well. We were supposed to have Rod here, Maxwell, from Journey to the Throne, where he talks about men transitioning in their leadership roles in the kingdom. But he was having technical difficulties, so he wouldn't be able to join us today. But we do have a replacement, which came at the last minute, which I'm thankful to God for, Mr. Garrett as well. And he is a relationship coach. And so I'll give you guys a little bit of time to go ahead and introduce yourselves further and let everybody know a little bit more about you.
Garrett, please.
All right. So my name is Garrett Lange. I have a passion for building relationships, and I have a passion for communication. And that's really what I focus on when I'm dealing with couples, is helping them understand the communication dynamics and the subconscious habits that are really tearing their relationship down, that they're really probably not aware of are happening and taking place because they've been long-standing patterns in their lives and in their interactions. And so just really helping people understand how to communicate effectively and then use those skills to build a relationship that they're looking for.
Yeah, and let people know about your book as well, Garrett.
Yeah, so in the spirit of communication, I wrote a book that talks about a lot of the negative pitfalls that, communication can bring. And then how do we overcome those, habits? How do we recognize how they're impacting our relationships negatively? And then, what skill sets do we need to develop to make sure that we overcome them and ultimately, empower ourselves to build the relationships we're looking for?
Yeah. And so if anybody, again, knows me, this is right up my wheelhouse, my book about relationships as well. And so Garrett and I will also be doing a separate segment on about my father's business Thursdays, where we discuss things like this. So if you want to find out more about his book and what he does, you can check out us out there as well. And Jay, go ahead.
My name is Jay Burroughs. I am the author of Porn, The Truth, The Whole Truth, and Nothing But the Truth. I'm also a screenplay writer, director, and I do podcasts, a couple of hosting things, a little bit of something.
Yeah, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So I see you doing a lot, and I really respect it, and I love your content and stuff like that. I don't get to keep up with stuff as much as I would like to because my plate is super full, but I'm definitely a fan of everything you have going on. So
thank you.
No problem. So we're going to jump right into this and get to these questions. And I know, like, sometimes I feel like when it comes to relationships that men and women really need to learn how to stay in their lane. So I hate to hear men trying to tell women how to be women, and then women trying to tell men how to be men. Like, stay in your lane, talk about what you know, and then let the other person be open to receive it. But I will jump in from time to time to offer a female point of view on some of these questions as well. But I really want the ladies to get some solid advice from men. And I know, Jay, you are just filled with wisdom and insight. And so, I know you will offer what you say is so real. So I just really want you to offer that. And then, of course, Garrett, as a relationship coach, that's needed as well. So I will be jumping in from time to time, but I really want to try to let you guys get to the information out that I think women really need. So the questions that I have, I posted on different social media platforms asking women what type of questions would they like to ask during this show. And so I got quite a few, so I can't ask all of them. So I picked some that I thought that was reoccurring questions. If anybody's watching and you have questions that you want them to answer as well, please feel free to say it, put them in the comments, and we'll get to those as well. But we'll start with the first question, which I get this question all the time. And so I'm again interested to hear what you fellas have to say about it. And it is, why do men cheat? Like, I can't tell you how many times I'm asked this question, but you guys go ahead and give your take on why you think men cheat.
Garrett, you want to tackle that one first?
I can. Honestly, there's a lot of layers to this, and there's not one answer that's going to sum up the reason for this. I think to start out with, it comes down to character flaws. I mean, we have just an absence of godly character being developed in men. And, when you think about, I have teenagers who are in school and they come home and they talk about how all their friends are talking about their body count, and all the, how many girls they can get with. And so you have this really toxic, culture that's being, perpetuated in the minds of men. And then, we also have this immediate gratification culture where we don't think about consequences. We think about what we want in the moment. And so, those things kind of compound. And then you couple that with just not having a good, strong biblical foundation in the scriptures and having those convictions well, rooted. And it leads to those types of behaviors. So I think there's probably a lot of contributing factors, but that's what I would say off the top.
Yeah, I like it. And I agree with a lot of that. Mr. Burroughs?
Piggybacking on for what Garrett just said, for me, I believe it's a lack of discipline, because most of men, black men in particular, were grown up in a society and were raised that it's more of a thing of having more. That body count situation makes you more of a man. Then when you get older, you realize that it's never been about how many women that you can deal with, but finding the right one. But that's not what's been pushed to you. That's not what socialization and social media and everything else has been put in front of your face. As plenty is a good thing. And when it's really not, you're spreading yourself so thin. And also another thing is, with that lack of discipline, there's a lack of focus. You don't focus on, I can't be all to one, the best man to everybody and still learn my partner at the same time. So a lot of men don't like commitment. So I'm trying to be all I can, but I'm kind of scared about stepping into this whole situation and staying still, because I feel like I may be losing something else. You ever heard the expression, when you're chasing one thing, like you're chasing money, the women get away, you're chasing women, you're losing money. So it's a discipline thing, and it all comes from your mindset. It all starts in your mindset.
So what? Okay, because you brought up another question, which I think it should be addressed. Is like, I think you said it, but men being afraid of commitment, is that strictly from like thinking they're going to miss out on something else, or like is that because in my mind I've always felt like underneath that is like a fear of failure, so to speak, because I mean, it's very easy to keep a woman happy, I guess, in the moment or temporarily, but can you sustain a relationship and maybe you think you can't? So I'm not sure. And Gary, you could jump in here too. Is that fear of commitment that you think men have, like, what is it from? Is it just what you said? Like, they don't want to miss out on Susie over there when
Yeah. It's the grass is greener kind of mentality.
Mm,
You may think that one thing here is good, but over there looks better.
mm,
And you realize that that's not the case.
wow.
And you kind of like, it's all about where your mindset is and the positions you are in life.
Mm,
In my belief, I think as you're young, you should be chasing purpose,
mm,
not women.
yeah.
They'll come, it comes along with it. But then when you're mature enough to handle a relationship, because most of us are not.
Mm,
A lot of men, especially growing up, if you're just growing up in a single parent household, you don't have that guidance. Like we spoke before, you have all the powers of Superman, but no one ever taught you how to use any of them. So you're just acting out of emotion and you don't know how to control it. You don't have a discipline for it. So you're just out here doing things that you shouldn't be, you shouldn't be involved in, but you make these harsh mistakes and you learn from them. Prayerfully, you learn from them.
yeah.
But prayerfully, you learn from them.
Yeah.
And this is another reason why I talk a lot about communication, because when you see, I think across society, there's just a really lack of people able to communicate and express themselves and articulate effectively. And so you have couples who will get together in these young relationships and, they are who they are and the other person's who they are. And they feel like they've experienced this person and then they might want something else. And so instead of trying to grow together and understand how to continue to meet the needs of one another, that communication doesn't exist. And so instead of pursuing that relationship on a deeper level and maybe in a newness that, you're looking for, whether it's in sexuality or whether it's in just, openness because you're guarded because of your past, right? We tend to just, we'll just stop that and go somewhere else because we don't want to put in the work to accomplish that deeper level of connection and meaningfulness, because it's just easier to just find the replacement.
Oh, wow. That's really good. And I mean, one thing that okay, so it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, Garrett, which is, to me, it kind of boils down to the sin nature that's in all of us. Because one thing about the flesh that the Bible talks about is that it's insatiable. Like, it's never satisfied. So you always want and want and want. And so one of the things that God tries to get us to do, or is trying to get us to do with accepting salvation and being renewed, is to get out of this fleshly, insatiable mindset and start to live life from a deeper, more meaningful perspective. And the transition from doing that, it really takes God to help us to really do that in the right way. So, and it always surprises me when women ask this question, and I'm interested in what you fellas have to say about this, because to me, the question itself implies that women do not cheat. So it's like, why do men cheat? Well, maybe it's the same reason that women cheat, like, because women are not innocent. And it always, like, when women say that. Now, I do know that, of course, in our culture, that and it's some truth to it. I'm not going to lie, that men are a little bit more, interested in sex or have a higher sex drive or all the other stuff than women. But that doesn't change the fact that women cheat as well. And so I think if you just look at some of the reasons that women cheat, your questions will be answered as far as why men would do it as well. I mean, it really kind of boils down to the same stuff, same sin nature, insatiability, you not feeling like you have something in the relationship that you feel like you need, and so you go look for it elsewhere. And so I kind of feel like a lot of the reasons are the same. And that, again, as a woman, sometimes we need to look in the mirror a little bit. And of course, I'm not saying that the woman who acts or anyone who acts that cheats themselves. But if you can just imagine reasons why women would cheat, I don't think they are very far off from the same reasons that men would cheat. Because especially in our culture now, I mean, it's almost encouraged, like, to women, like, hey, you can do the same thing that men do. If men doing it to you, you could do it to them, stuff like that. And so it kind of boils down to the same stuff. So did any of you want to comment on that before we go to the next question?
Well, I think it's just, it comes down to a mindset of, victim mentality. Because if you ask somebody, why did you cheat? They almost always will say, well, it's because my partner my partner wasn't fulfilling my needs, my partner wasn't this, right? Instead of taking ownership and saying, it's on me.
Yeah.
I chose to sin.
Yeah.
I chose to abandon my vows. I chose, right? So if we can just encourage to empower people to say, look, take ownership for yourself. That's where all the empowerment of life is in taking ownership for yourself, because we don't have control over other people. We can't determine what other people are going to do. But I control what I do. And that's where the empowerment and the, really the hope and optimism of the future lies in what we can accomplish through our own dedication and our commitments to do what's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You have something to add, Mr. Burroughs?
Just what Garrett said, accountability is like kryptonite to people.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, even, and I talk about in my own books, in relationships, we get so focused on the other person when really I believe the purpose of relationship is to help you see yourself, because there are some things you will never be able to learn about yourself if you just stayed by yourself. But through relationship, through commitment, through love, you start to see yourself through somebody else's eyes, and it gives you an opportunity to reflect, because we all see ourselves from a biased perspective. We always think that what we're doing is not that bad, or we have a reason. And like you say, Jay, that accountability, no, but relationships are to help you, give you the opportunity to take a deeper look at who you are. So, but let's go to the next question. I'm trying to see which one. Okay, so this is a good one. Why do men stop courting their wives after they marry them? So, everybody knows, or I don't want to say everybody knows, but they lay it on thick in the beginning. They want you. You guys were talking about that newness. It's exciting. But then after you get the woman, you marry her, time passes. It's like, I don't have to put the same work in I used to put in. I'm cool now. So why do men do that?
People get comfortable. Simple as that. People get comfortable. And that just doesn't go with men. That goes with women as well.
Yeah.
Because if the man starts off courting you a certain kind of way, and the reaction that he's getting from you is a certain reaction. Like it's kind of like every relationship is a give and take. We go out to dinner, there are responses that you have for me. I buy you a gift, there's a response for that. If I'm not getting the same responses anymore either, then I'm not going to do the same things. And then once people get comfortable, it's like, okay, I did all this to get you here. You're here now. And a lot of people don't realize that it still takes the same things to maintain and keep you here, because now I feel that there's no threat in you leaving anymore or going out elsewhere. When in the back of your mind, that's always a thing that's a possibility. No matter how good your foundation is or how you are as a person, you may have all the values and moral standards, but temptation is always at your doorstep constantly. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind.
Garrett?
Yeah, and I think, when people are in a relationship that's dating, or even engaged, when it's, early on in the engagement process, there's risk associated with not living up to expectations. And that risk, the mental feeling of that risk no longer existing once the ring's on the finger, I think guys, and girls too, can come to that feeling of, I don't really need to do this. It might be nice and I appreciate it some, and I'm sure they appreciate it some, but it's not necessary anymore because there's no risk. They're not going to divorce me probably, especially if we have kids, right? The kids will feel like a solidification of that relationship. And so, yeah, I think there's this really, perception that sets in of just mental laziness and comfortability, like, Jay said.
So in a nutshell, people lazy. So, I always say, like, I noticed that as I'm getting older, I'm more resistant to change as I used to be. Like, when you're younger, change is fun. You have energy to burn. But I think as you get older, you become more resistant to change because you subconsciously understand that your energy is declining and change requires more energy. And so it's like, if you want stuff to stay where it is, well, you know where it is, so you don't have to expend any more extra energy trying to find or look or do, because your energy is declining. And so, it's kind of like what you guys are. It's what puts me in the mind of what you're saying is like, okay, I gave you all this energy before. It's comfortable now. Like, I need to use my energy for other stuff now because I only have a limited supply. And so you just decide to ration out your energy to your spouse and then use your other energy for other stuff. Sometimes, like you said, Garrett, you have kids, you have jobs, you have careers, it's like she can survive on that little bit. She'd be all right, but again, what Jay pointed out, you have to do these things to keep the marriage, to keep a relationship sustained, or keep the marriage sustained. And something that always stands out to me, of course, in the Bible, God compares the relationship with mankind to a marriage. And it's the same thing with God. Like, you cannot just, you feel that fire for God in the beginning, that passion, then over time it wanes. You start, I'll pray next week, I'll skip church this, but you have to keep that going. You have to keep that going. You have to keep your passion for God going, your interest, your investment for God going, or that relationship fizzles as well. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, where's God? And God is like, where are you? You forgot about me like months ago. So I think it's a comparison to the same energy and time you have to put into the marriage is the same energy and time you have to put in your relationship with God. It has to be a sustained kind of regular thing if you want to keep the connection strong. So, yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like you were saying about the energy, if we replace that word energy with time, it's the same situation, because what usually happens in most relationships is time that you put in begins to fade.
Yeah.
It becomes less and less and smaller because priorities happen. Though you start off, it's just you two in the marriage. Then you have children. So now time has to be divided between them, you, work. That's another thing. If you're active in the church or whatever you're doing, time begins to get stretched out. And like you said, when you get older, you don't have the energy. You also don't have the time. Because now time becomes a lot more precious to you.
Absolutely.
You're walking these days, the days seem longer, but these years are getting shorter. Friends who were around yesterday are not here anymore. It's just a ticking clock. So you're becoming a miser with your own time. Like, listen, I'm not going to share all this with you right now. This has to be worth my while. So now you want to be invested in something. So you're kind of cautious. You're light stepping. You're not going out. Like you said, when you first started, you were younger. It was frivolous. We could do all these things. Now you're calculating. Okay, we go to the movies here, and we go to dinner, and then we got to get back here. I got to go to work tomorrow.
I need 8 hours of sleep.
Sleep. The kids is going to be wanting to do what they want to do. So now your time constraints are totally different now.
Yeah,
that happens a lot in relationships.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then you're not even talking about financial responsibilities if you're buying a house and stuff is So absolutely. And so I think that's important point to make is that, and I'm saying this for women, you have to be I don't want to say realistic, but you have to be a little bit more flexible when it comes to your reasons why you think your husband might not be doing that. Because I notice even in conversations that I have with women, they tend to take it personally. Like, oh, I'm not important to you anymore. You don't ever spend time with me and things like that. And I'm not saying that that's not the case sometimes, but you have to be a little bit more open-minded and understand that it's not always because the person has an issue with you. They're trying to manage the responsibilities, or your husband is trying to manage the responsibilities and loads of life the same as you. And so it's just very easy to get kind of overwhelmed. And just some things fall by the wayside. So I think it's important for women to understand that when that happens, you don't necessarily need to take it personally. Sometimes it just requires a conversation and things like that, which I know men don't listen very well. Sometimes, ladies, I do get it. And it's another question I want to ask to the fellas, but just try not to take things so personally, because when you do, you approach the conversation in a totally different spirit and energy than when you just say, okay, we need to talk about this because we're starting to have some issues and how can we work on it together, as opposed to you're doing this to me because you don't love me or you don't have you have a problem with me. So I just wanted to point that out. So Garrett, did you want to add anything, or should we go to the next question?
You can go to the next question.
Okay. And so this is not, I just thought of this one as we were talking, because I hear this a lot from women, because I'm also a relationship coach, but why men don't listen? Like, why does it seem like when you're trying to talk to men, they either blow off what you say, they act like they're listening, not their head, but they're actually not. If you ask them 5 minutes later, what did you just say? They can't tell you. So why does it seem like men don't listen when women are talking?
Well, I'll say this. Listening is a skill that needs to be learned And when it comes to communication, and this is hugely important to couples, what does your partner expect when you try to communicate? Right? And so when you ask that question, hey, you know what, if I say to my partner, we need to have a talk, what's the first thought in their mind? Is it oh man, not enough one? Right? Here we go again, right? We have to, because we respond based on our belief about what the experience is going to be. Right? We've created a belief over time about what to expect in those experiences. And so if over time, and this is what I would encourage a husband or a wife to ask if they're struggling to get their partner to talk, what do they expect? And have I conditioned them in the way that I go about it to make them not want to communicate or to avoid it or to shut down? And a lot of times the either refusal to engage or the just not really paying attention is just due to them being conditioned that communication is a futile process and it's not going to result in anything positive anyways, so they don't give it the attention it deserves.
Very good answer. Good answer. Jay?
Garrett brought up an interesting point. He said in ways that we've been conditioned. When you're in a relationship and you're approaching men, from my perspective, and I've seen this over the years, if you come at me with negative energy, I don't want to hear anything you have to say. Where a lot of women go wrong, they step into their masculinity instead of using femininity. When you approach a man in a feminine way, you can get pretty much anything you ask for. He will listen to everything you have to say because it's your approach. If you approach a man like a man, I don't want to hear anything you have to say. Because now it's like a thing where you're nagging, you're getting at me, and it's changing my energy. I want peace. If I can have peace at all times, and you can add to this peace, we will be fantastic. But if you start bothering and disturbing my peace, it's like a repellent. It's like the opposite end of a magnet. And when you have two magnets and they're both on the same polar, they push away from each other. One is on one pole, the other's on the other, they attract. That's the thing. You're pushing me further away. I shut down. I don't want to talk about this. Everything sounds like the grown people in the Peanuts comics. Everything, and I don't want to hear anything you have to say at the point. So it's not getting through. But everything, when you approach me in your feminine energy, because remember, your feminine energy is what attracted me to you in the first place. And you approach me that way. Everything that you say sounds great to me. Okay, let's just change this. And most men don't want to argue in the first place. So it's very easy to get what you want. So we don't have to have an argument about this? All I got to do is what you just asked me to do?
Yeah, and keeping in mind that communication studies have shown that 93% of communication of what people interpret is your body language, your tone, your volume, your expression. It's not the words you say. And so I see couples get in fights all the time. And when they get in a fight about the implied intent of the conversation, they defend the words and they ignore the fact that their tone was bad. They were rolling their eyes. They're, being super, sarcastic in their body language. Like all the things that really direct the message get ignored. And then all I said was welcome home. But, but the way they said it clearly means you're not welcome home, right? So if you want to improve communication, focus on the 93%.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. So I have something to say about what both of you me and said. Jay, so when you say, because I know there are going to be women asking this, what do you mean your feminine energy and your masculine energy? Like, what does that look like to a man? Are you just saying to come in a softer way? And then how does that play into what Garrett is talking about your body language? Do you rub him on the shoulder? Like, so okay. What do you mean by feminine energy?
Okay. So you wanted to take the trash out. He didn't take it out. You asked him this morning. He didn't take it out. You asked him again in the afternoon. He still hasn't taken it out. So now you're disturbed. You feel some kind of way. You are acting off in an emotion because you're upset that he didn't take. So you're going to take this anger out on too. So you approach him Why haven't you taken out the trash? I asked you 2 times today to take out the trash. What's wrong with you? Not getting your point across. You approach him. Hey, hon, I did ask you earlier, would you mind taking out the trash? You might have forgot about it or something. Can you take that out for me? I appreciate it. Okay. I'll do it right now. Totally different with your approach. But you got what you wanted. That's the purpose. A lot of women that I've ran into get fueled with emotion. Once you get fueled with emotion, I don't want to deal with this. I still may take the trash out, but now if I do, you're thinking, okay, this is how I have to approach him now. Same thing Garrett told you, you're conditioning him now. And now every time you're approaching me hostile because you think in your mind this is the right way to do things. It's actually not.
So you said something really interesting, which I want to try to pinpoint really quickly. You said women react with emotion, and for men, it's like, I don't want to deal with this. So what is it about that emotional response that makes men not want to? Because a lot of times I talk to women, they make it seem like men don't have feelings. And I say, men have feelings. Like, come on. Like, they do have feelings. They're not, if they didn't have feelings, I think this world would have exploded a long time ago. But they do have feelings. And so it's not a matter of just emotion itself. So what is it about a woman's kind of, I guess, amplified emotion for men that is like, I don't want to deal with that? So what is that?
For one, okay, let's say we have a crisis situation. Car got repoed or whatever the case is, right? You're upset. You're very upset about the situation. You tell me what's going on and all this stuff. As a man, I have to think logically. How do I fix the problem?
Okay.
That's where my mind goes immediately. Something's wrong with my wife. I got to fix this because I'm the man. I have to fix this.
Okay.
I can't sit there and cry with you because that's not fixing anything.
Yeah.
Now, I can give you a bit of consoling and say, listen, it's going to be all right. Everything's going to be cool. Let me handle this situation. But some women don't want you to do that. They want you to be involved with the sadness. I want you to feel as bad as I feel about the situation. But we're not getting anything done. Nothing's being solved.
Yeah.
And men are more logical thinkers. We are on the plane of, okay, how do I fix this? This is where we seem robotic. We seem like we don't have emotion. I'm not going to side with my emotions because it's not time for that right now. It's time for me to fix the problem. Then I can get you out of your emotions and I don't have to deal with this right now. You'll feel better. I solved the problem. I'm the winner.
Yeah, right.
And here's the thing. It's interesting because women and men can be, really different in a lot of ways. But I think God intended for us to be each other's counterparts. And so I think to Jay's point, sometimes men are too far to the rigid side of just get things done, and they're not very empathetic. And that's can be a big weakness in men. When the Bible says, dwell with your wife according to understanding. So guess what that means? I've got to work on the empathetic side of myself so that I maybe don't, get, knee deep in the weeds of emotions with my wife for, an entire day. But there is a time and place to console and to reassure and then to get about fixing the problem, as Jay might put it. So, finding that, where do I meet her in the middle? And we find that the balance of what's really the best case scenario where neither one of our, maybe weaknesses is dominating the situation.
Yeah. And I like that. I like what both of you guys are saying. And even with what you're saying, Garrett, because I do think that sometimes even like you said about men going too far in the logical direction, because as far as I understand, men are more logical, women are more emotional. And a lot of the times, instead of those things becoming the assets that God intended for them to be, because it brings us together, it pairs us together very well. Because if we both were logical, what type of relationship would that be? And if we're both emotional, what type of relationship would that be? So it's almost like we are opposite to come together so that we can create a more complete picture. But in our fallen state, men sometimes go too logical and women sometimes go too emotional. And by having each other in each other's lives, we help the person to work on the part that is their weakness. So men can learn how to be a little bit more empathetic. Women can learn how to be a little bit more logical, but it does take that communication between the two and the relationship between the two to be strengthened and growing for that, I guess you could say, osmosis to take place, that we kind of learn the other's language in a sense. And it helps us to become more well-rounded people. I mean, just in general. So I really like, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to say it's really important because this topic can be kind of a hot button topic, because I think when people make statements like men are more logical, women can be tempted to hear that as, well, women are illogical, and that's not what's being said.
No.
You know what I mean? And so it's important to acknowledge the differences, but not as an attack or an insult to the other person. You know what I mean? Because men, I know some men that are extraordinarily emotional, right? It's not across the board. It's maybe more, prominent in men versus women. And so every single couple needs to understand where they land on this spectrum and what's going to work for their relationship. Because if you ask all these questions, and instead of saying why men, if you were to say, why does my husband? Why do I? Right? And you can really zoom in on, what's unique and special about my specific relationship. Even though there may be some generalities that tend to apply across the board, it doesn't mean it's going to be exact for you. So, if we change the question, we can really zone in on ourselves and our own marriages and optimize them the best.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that and clarified that, because I don't want to give off that impression that, women are illogical men, because it can vary. And like you say, I do know some very, very emotional men, but they usually don't do well with very, very emotional women. They need a woman that's a little bit more stable. So we do complement each other, and we have to see that those compliments and strengths in each other are to come together. They're not in opposition of each other. And so, I'm thank you for clarifying that. I'm a pretty logical woman myself. But I've learned how to be a little bit more logical over the years, actually because of my husband. And that's why I say that I do see how that relationship is meant to complement. But of course, in our fallen state, the enemy uses those things that God gave us as strengths, because being emotional is not a bad thing. Like, can you imagine a world with no emotion? Like, it would be terrible. So we just have to see our strengths, understand our weaknesses, and whatever they are, because it's not typical for all women and men to be the same, like you said. And then we have a partner, which God will usually bring us if you pray or choose for yourself, somebody that complements where you are weak, and not just trying to find somebody that's just like you. Because I think a lot of times that's what we expect. We want the other person to be just like us. They can't be just like you. Like, that's not going to help you grow if you're with somebody that's just like you. So thank you for that. Jay, did you have anything you want to add?
Nope, we can move on.
Yeah. Let's go to the next question. I had other stuff, but time is running. I mean, of course, this could be probably like a part 5, part 10 show, but we want to keep it to the time frame. So let me see amongst the questions that I have, which one. Okay, let me ask this one. So this was a reoccurring question that a lot of women had, but why do men still look at other women when they're married? Like, is their wife not enough?
Go ahead, Jay. I'll follow up with you.
Okay. It's kind of like shopping.
Mm-hmm.
You may see other things in front of you, but admiration is one thing. Lusting after someone is something totally different. You go outside, you may admire the flowers in somebody else's garden, but you have your own at home. So, I see it, it's a beautiful thing, but okay. But when you're lusting after somebody else's things, that's a totally different look. Most women want you just to keep your eyes forward, don't look at nobody, don't say anything to anybody. I had a thing, like, when I was in a relationship, I would sit, when I go to a shoe store with my significant other, I would sit down and look at my feet. Because there's so many women in the shoe store. So I would look at my feet and I would play little tap games with my feet. So I can't be blamed for looking at anybody else, because I'm sitting here this whole time looking at my feet. And that just was one of the things that just kept me out of trouble. You know, I don't like conflict. I like peace. And I didn't want to be bothered with all the extra stuff. So that's why I just did that. But I think it's one of those things with admiration is one thing. You know, women are beautiful. We all know this. Y'all admire each other.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
But when you're lusting, you know there's a different look when someone's lusting after someone versus admiring someone.
So would you say to a woman, if you see your husband looking at a woman, don't get so upset about it like right away, because that doesn't, just because he's looking, it's not a big deal.
He's trying to get involved. No, it doesn't.
Okay.
And if you think that, then you might have to question the man that you chose to be with. If you really believe that he's going to go after another woman like that, then he may not be the person for you.
Yeah, because I think the assumption is that if he's looking, he wants her. So it's like,
That's not always the case.
So So good point. Garrett?
Yeah, so just to follow up on that. So there's a difference between seeing somebody and gawking. 3, 4, 5, 6 looks, staring, right? Wives are pretty intuitive. They can usually get a pretty good read on the level of interest that a man is showing in a particular woman, especially if she's dressed to impress, and to show herself off. And so to Jay's point, if you have a really strong marriage where you have extraordinarily high trust levels and a pretty woman walks by and the guy looks and sees her walk by and then he goes back to what he's doing, probably no issue, right? And so if that's an issue, then you have to ask the question, what else has led to that level of insecurity and or lack of trust to make something that seemingly insignificant be a huge problem? Now, I don't want to dismiss every time a guy looks at a woman as being insignificant, because there's plenty of guys out there who have a real problem with lusting and looking and giving their wives the impression that their interests are elsewhere. And that's a huge problem. And I think when it comes to that level of interest, it's because society and guys, even Christian guys, not many people hold themselves to the standard of, hey, if you look at a woman and lust after her, you've committed adultery in your heart, right? It's okay to look and not touch. I'm just window shopping, right? So we have to be careful that we're not too far extreme one way or the other. Only a guy knows for sure what he's thinking in his mind. He knows if he's inappropriate in the way he's behaving. And, we just need to really work at drawing ourselves as men, drawing ourselves closer to the Lord, closer to our wives, and being respectful. Because even if, and this is where I think dwelling with understanding comes into play, even if I'm looking and not lusting, right? I just noticed, hey, that person walked past me. Hey, what do you know? They're really attractive. But I go back to it. Now, if that's really upsetting to my wife, my responsibility, like Christ loved the church, is to be sacrificial to my wife. And I need to work hard at that area of my life then, because that's me trying to meet her where she is. Now, if I want that not to be a problem, guess what? I need to take responsibility for that relationship and build it to where it's not a problem.
Yeah. Wow.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please do.
Like Garrett was saying, it's like, what is it that making her insecure about this? Something, it had to be something that I've done. Maybe she's seen something or something from my past that I told her about or something of that nature. So I need to find out what is the root cause of this, because it's more than just me looking. It's more than that. If she can't be secure with what we have and know that just a woman passing by my eyesight is not going to change that, there's something deeper than that. And that's a conversation that we need to have. So when you feel a certain kind of way, a lot of men do blow it off. Like, come on, I'm just looking at somebody. We need to sit down and have a conversation now. And that's a sign saying that, hey, there's something deeper here. And we as men need to acknowledge that and let's sit down and talk about this. Because if you're getting that upset and bent out of shape about it, that you have to say something to me, or, I could see it unnerving you on your face, that's something we need to talk about.
Yeah. And so I like what you guys are saying. And one thing I want to point out as a woman, I think, and this is just my opinion, that women are naturally insecure. And I think, in my understanding, it comes from, our sinful state. Because if you go back to like Adam and Eve before, like Eve was Adam's world, like she was everything to him. I mean, of course, not before God. Well, actually, he did put her before God, but she was everything to him. And so we have lost that connection with men when we're living outside of the way God designed things to be. And I think it naturally makes women insecure and question their place in their husbands' lives, in the world, things like that. So if you notice, women usually have much more issues when it comes to their appearance and insecurity, and comparing themselves to other women and things like that. It's like we're always questioning our value. We're already questioning where we stand. And I think that's an internal thing that a lot of women go through. And it just comes from us living in a sinful condition. If we were the way God originally intended for things to be, every woman would know she's a queen in her own right, because God affirms that for us, because that's what he created us to be. But outside of that, it becomes a question. And then we need men to confirm for us, okay, I this is where I want to be. I need you to verify for me that this is actually where I am. So when they see you doing things or looking at women or whatever like that, it goes back to them questioning themselves. And so we need to, as women, try to get our identity. I don't want to say try to get. We need to get our identity more from Christ instead of looking for men to affirm who we are. We need to get that from God. And then a lot of that insecurity won't be as much of an issue. And I can say that from personal experience. So do you guys have anything to say about that? Do you think women are kind of naturally insecure?
Go ahead, Garrett.
I think society is conditioning women to focus solely on appearances and external things. Mm-hmm. And obviously guys probably don't help with that, with, the fact that we're drawn to the eye gate, I think naturally. Mm-hmm. And, we can't control. Here's the thing. I encourage couples, don't try to control the situation.
Exactly.
Try to influence it, right? Because even things you can't control, you can influence. Mm-hmm. So if your wife is struggling with insecurity, or if she's struggling with feeling like, you don't have as much interest in her based on this, that, or the other, well, you can't control her thoughts, but you can influence them. And so then start taking actions to do just that.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I can tell you're a very good relationship coach. Jay, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's about an order. Because if you look at it, even the Bible states, it's God, man is following God, the woman is following a man. If and I'm made it very clear and plain that my focus is always going to be on Christ. Mm. So it doesn't allow me to do certain things. Mm. I adhere to the spirit. So I do not mind the things of the flesh. Mm-hmm. So that's where I am at all times, then fine. It's when I start straying away from my focus being on Christ. Mm. Now everything else becomes a question.
Exactly.
Because it's just like when the enemy goes into the garden, the first thing he does is ask questions.
Exactly.
He also approaches with a question. So that's where doubt comes in.
Exactly.
God is not the author of confusion. It's just one straight way. If we stay in this order, then we'll be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So when you're not in that order, now everything goes to pot.
Absolutely. And it's a mess. And it's not easy to do that, let me add. And it's always something that you're trying to stay in that order for the rest of your life, but we definitely have to keep working on it. And it kind of goes back to what you guys were saying before about putting in the work when I asked about why men stop courting their wives. And I was saying that you have to put the same work in your relationship with God that you have to do your relationship. And that's what a lot of our life is about, is what are we putting the work into, whether it's your job or your career or yourself or your family. Like, you have to decide where you're going to put the work in, and staying spiritually aligned with God is just one of those things that you have to make a decision to do. And because it helps everything else kind of fall in place. So I totally agree with that. So let's go to, of course, we didn't get to all the questions, but I want to go into this last question that I have here, because I do think it's important. Because again, we always see ourselves from a biased perspective. And of course, women look at what we do and we think it's the all in all. And men look at what they do and they think it's the all in all. They're doing everything. But I think as a woman, a lot of times we don't really understand the burden that men have been giving as the head of families, the head of churches, the head in general. And so one question a young lady asked me, I actually used to go to elementary school with her. She asked me, what type of burdens do you men have to deal with, or how hard is it for you? Or can you explain some of the things that you deal with being the head?
Garrett, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. So, when I started having kids, I had kids pretty young. I was, in my early 20s when I had my kids, and it was crazy how, as I watched them grow into, 3, 4, 5 years old, I started to see my sin patterns bear themselves out in their behaviors. Whether it was anger, selfishness, just whatever it was very obvious that they were products of myself and what they observed.
Wow.
So it became a very kind of a burden, to say, for lack of a better term, to feel like I'm in a fishbowl and everything I do is constantly on display for my kids or my wife to look at. And I'm supposed to be the leader. I'm supposed to be the example. I'm supposed to be, following Christ in a way that they can look at and say, that's the way I should be following Christ. And so that was a huge responsibility that I felt burdened by, because I didn't always live up to that. And that's a high calling, and just feeling that, even when, my kids, my kids are all, older teens now. And it's like, what, how much of their Christ-like walk, or the lack thereof, is a result of my not setting the right example.
Wow. So
that's I guess the burden that I would say I carried, and it to some degree still do, even though they're older. It's just that feeling that, I'm accountable for the example that I set to them.
Wow. Jay, you got something to add there?
Yeah, to piggyback off what he's saying, it's like you are a product of where you come from. If you don't have your father is your manual to being a man and to being a father. But if you lack that, then you are subject to mirroring things that you just see around you. So you may not have that manual. You may not know how to be a good father. You may not know how to be a good husband because you don't have the examples. So you're walking through with trial and error. And a lot of men have that because we're raised in single family homes, absentee fathers and things of that nature. So no one taught you how to use or display this certain energies and different things that you need to do. There's a right and there's a wrong way. But if you don't have guidance, it becomes more and more difficult to do. And you're just trying to figure it out as you go along. You're building as you're flying. Well, this didn't work. At first, you start off, it was just me. And I have my own issues. So I'm trying to solve those. And then I get into a relationship. Now I've taken on someone else's issues along with mine. Now I'm trying to solve theirs. Then we have offspring. We have children. Now we got to deal with them. We got to bring them up properly. And you're still at that same point where you were still building. It seems like you have it all together, but 9 times out of 10 you don't. And everything is trial and error.
Yeah. So like, do you feel like, and I don't want to say compared to women because you probably don't really know, but if you want to add into that, you can. Do you feel like men have more burden? Because like, okay, so like for Jewish people, because I, sometimes talk to Jewish people about their beliefs, and they feel like it's their responsibility to, reflect God in the earth and let people know about God and stuff like that. And it's a burden to them. And it's a huge responsibility that it's especially for them. So do you feel like as a man that you have this huge burden and responsibility that just adds a lot of pressure and stress to your life that maybe women don't have to deal with? Like, how do you see that?
I don't feel like we have more so much as different. A wife has, her own set of burdens and responsibilities in life. And so I wouldn't say that I'm more burdened than my wife, although the burdens I deal with are different. And the thing that, the Bible says God won't give us more than he can handle, but his grace is always sufficient. So the burdens that God gives me in my role, he also then equips me and provides me with what I need to fulfill that obligation in a way that my wife does in her own roles, right? So me trying to live in and carry the burdens my wife has might be more than I can feel like I can handle, because they're not the burdens that I'm probably designed or equipped to hold. And so I think it might lead to wrong conclusions to attempt to measure or assess the burdens of the wife as the husband or vice versa, because just that's just not how we deal with things, right? We have our own burdens and our own roles. And, my dad used to say, look, you're one sinner married to a sinner raising sinners. Don't expect it to go smooth. And it's just different. We just deal with different things, not necessarily greater or less. It would be what I say.
Yeah. Jay, I have this. Go ahead.
I agree with Garrett. You don't have greater or less, but it is a choice. You choose to take on things. And as we walk through this life, like I said, you start off, it's just you. You choose to get into a relationship, meaning now you choosing to take on somebody else and what they're going through. You have children from this relationship, and now you have to raise them, but it still was a choice. You made a choice to go to become mothers and fathers, and now you have to take on that. Financial burdens, you choose them because you make certain decisions. People don't make mistakes, people make choices. And that's just another choice, whether it be good or bad, indifferent, wrong or right. It was a choice that you made. You came to a certain point in life and you have to choose. Just like our walk with Christ, you chose. It wasn't forced upon you. This burden was, your bag was open. You seen this and said, okay, this will be good for me. I'm going to put this in here and I'm going to take this on. And now you have to deal with it accordingly. Sometimes it may get overwhelming and you may feel that you're overwhelmed. This is what prayer is for. And this is where you ask for the guidance from the Spirit. So when you're in tune, he's always going to tell you, hey, tell your wife that you love her today. Give her a hug. Because that may be that one thing that you don't notice that she needs. And sometimes people can't express their needs to you. They can express their wants and their desires. And we can all do that easily.
Yeah.
Telling people our needs is not always the thing that we can do. We can't express it very well all the time. And those are the things, like, you've chosen to take on these burdens, so you have to be in tune.
Yeah. So backing off of that question, and this is just it came to my mind when you were talking. Do men, like, when you marry a woman, in what way do you feel responsible for her? Because I know, like, as the head, of course, I'm not a head, but do you feel responsible for your wife like you do? It's not the same, but like a child. I don't want to say it's like a child. I know some women might not like that comparison, but I'm saying, how do you feel responsible for your wife? Because I think it's different than how women don't really feel responsible for their husband, but it seems like men feel that way. What do you guys think about that?
Garrett?
Yeah, I feel responsible in the respect of, I need to make sure I'm bringing the right influence to the relationship. I need to make sure I'm bringing the right provision. I'm bringing the right character. I'm being the best version of myself to bring to the table, to give her the best environment and opportunity to succeed and flourish in her Christian walk and in her life and in her relationship with myself. Ultimately, she has decisions, and she can choose to either respond in light of what I'm attempting to bring to the environment and the situation. So the responsibility, I feel, isn't for her choices or her outcomes. It's for creating the scenario where her choices are best able to be made for the betterment of the situation.
Yeah, I get that. Wow. Jay?
The first thing in a relationship, especially if you come from an environment that I've come from, protector and provider. Immediately. If we're in a relationship and you are the woman that I've chosen to attach myself to, you're me now, protector and provider. I got to do that first and foremost. So that means that's the drive and the energy that's pushing me to do the things that I do on a daily basis for you. And when you can conquer those two things and make for a safe space, it kind of opens up the road. It's like the pavement on the street that makes the cars a lot smoother than rolling over gravel and things like that. It makes things smoother for you. You have to get those two things out of the way, because when you're not providing, financial stability is up and down. It's going to create whole lot of chaos.
Mm.
And if you can't protect your home, then you as a man, it's like, well, why are you there?
Mm.
This is where you get these things where you get sayings like, oh, I can do bad all by myself.
Mm.
I don't need a man.
Mm.
You know, you get these sayings because they haven't been under a covering.
Mm.
The first thing, like when you give yourself to Christ, you're covered now. There's a sense of security there.
Mm.
You know, there's a sense of provision there. Everything is there now, and you can move comfortably in this space.
Mm.
And that's the same thing you want to extend to your significant other.
Mm.
How can we have children? Because I've already laid down a foundation for us.
Mm.
How can we move about from one place to another? Because you know that you're secure with me. You
Mm.
know I have everything under control. You can turn to me and you know I'm safe.
Mm. Mm.
And that once you provided those things and you laid down that foundation, that's the start to building.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, I'm learning so much. I love it. I love to learn anyway. And I like to give males perspective about things because I think all too often we kind of stay in our own little bubbles and don't really try to understand stuff from another person's perspective, especially when it comes to men and women, because we kind of see things differently. But I really like this. I'm really enjoying this. And I've definitely added some tools to my toolbox to use in my own relationship. But I really like that both of you, what you're talking about, like, it is, I mean, even the Bible talks about God has placed a huge burden on mankind. We all have burdens that we have to kind of live up to. But I like that both of you kind of express in different ways that it comes from being aligned with Christ. Like, these things are going to be much, much heavier when you're out of God's alignment than when you are, because he kind of provides and helps you to do the job correctly. Like, he knows that it's a burden, but he has the tools and things to help you do it. Like Garrett was saying, like, to create that environment. How can you create that environment? You need God to help you create that environment. And you know, Jay, what you're saying, providing and protecting and doing everything you need to do there, you kind of need to get that from above first, and then you kind of and our extension of that to your family. And so very, very beautiful. I love it. If you guys have anything to add to that, I have one last question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up.
Go ahead.
No, okay.
So yes.
Yeah. So the last question, of course, I didn't get to them all. I probably said that already. What do you think women do? Like, one thing that you would say that women do that kind of ruins their relationship and marriages. If a woman asked you that, what would you say? I mean, I know there's more than one, but just point to one that you think is like, if women would just stop doing this, then their relationships would go better. And I know it's a very presumptuous comment to make, but I just want to hear from what you guys think.
I will say in a majority of the couples that I coach, the issue that the husband tends to take up first and foremost is a lack of respect. Mm-hmm. And that can bear itself out in a number of ways, whether it's interrupting conversation, talking over the top, you know, name calling, demeaning, belittling, you know, not appreciating, like that those are all forms of disrespect. So when those things start to happen, it typically puts most of the men I've talked with into retreat mode. They shut down, they distance, and they start to just, and it's a fight or flight mechanism, right? They're not being rude. They're not being mean. It's not done out of intentional spite. It's just fight or flight. And they don't want to fight. So their flight takes charge and they just withdraw. And then that withdrawal leads the wife to feeling alone and left and uncared for and unprioritized. And that drives those negative feelings in her. And so she comes harder and he withdraws farther, and that cycle just repeats.
Wow. Jay, are you going to say the same thing, or are you going to say something different?
I may say the same thing in a different fashion.
Okay.
Talk less, listen more.
Okay.
It's really that for a lot of men, like Garrett said, you know, the respect level. If you're listening prompts action. Hearing is one thing. I can sit there and hear you, but listening actually prompts an action, because you're internalizing what somebody's saying to you, and you're saying, okay, they want me to do something this way, so I have to take action in a different form. Or they need to do this that way, so I have to take action in a different form. That's listening. When you're just hearing somebody, you're just waiting for your turn to talk. It doesn't make sense. So talk less, listen more.
Mm.
You know, there's a thing called your teeth. When you close them, it's like a gate around your tongue. That works.
Wow. So I say to comment for you from what you both said. So what Garrett said, I hear this a lot from men. So even me hearing you say that, it's not a surprise whatsoever. And it seems to me to be a little bit of a disconnect sometimes with women as far as what they, of course, not all women, but what they consider respectful and not respectful. And then even to go with what you said, Jay, I think a lot of times women, because we are usually more emotionally vulnerable, and we're not as physically strong, a lot of times women use their words as weapons because they feel like their emotions are not being paid to or trampled on, and they use their words as weapons, and then it comes out as disrespect, even if it's nagging. To me, it's like that's the best way you feel like you can return a blow for a blow. I don't want to say it like that, but that's what women do. And I think it's instinctual because it's like, I know I can't wrestle him and win, I can't make him do what I want him to do, so what else do I have in my toolbox to try to, get this situation to be the way that I want it to be? And it's your mouth. I mean, the Bible talks about the mouth and what it does and how powerful it can be. And so I think women do that sometimes without thinking about it, but you do need to think about it, because I think a lot of times women just feel like, well, you hurt me or you made me feel this way, or how else can I get you to do this or whatever. And I have to use my mouth. And like Garrett said, which I think is super duper important, your influence is going to be more beneficial than you trying to make somebody do something, because that's really what that is. It's like, how can I make them do something? God doesn't make us do anything. So, but he influences us to do things. And you have to understand the power of your influence over you trying to force somebody to do things. And that requires some thought. That requires you to sit back and think, okay, how can I get the results? Like what you said, Jay, you got what you wanted when he took out the garbage. How do I get the results that I want from this relationship? The words are not working, so what do I do? How do I wield my influence appropriately to get the reaction that I want? And you have to stop it and stop your mouth at that point and consider. You might not think that what you're saying is disrespectful, but you have to consider on the other end of the spectrum, okay, how is he going to take this and say things in a way that will put him in the mood to be more open to listening and kind of do what it is you're asking him to do. So like you said, it was a different answer, but it's still very, very prevalent, but it's the same thing. And it's really important. And I think women need to kind of understand a little bit more, because we do have a lot of influence. I think sometimes more influence than we realize when it comes to our husbands and men, and how we can affect them. And we need to use that influence in the right way. So,
yeah. And something to add to that, I was talking with a group of employees the other day, and I asked the question, if somebody compliments you, do you remember it a month from now? And they said, probably not. But I said, if somebody insults you, do you remember it a month from now? And every one of them was like 100%. And so recognizing that the negative and the hurtful and the things that tear down, they carry much more weight in a relationship. And so we have to be that much more on guard that we don't allow those things to contaminate the situation, because you're going to work 10 times as hard trying to repair than you are not doing the damage in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Jay, did you have anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
Just the saying that I heard, murmuring and complaining is your way of telling God he's not doing it right and you can do better. Just something to bear in mind.
Wow. So this was a very interesting discussion. I really like what you both brought to the conversation. I'm so glad that you joined us, Garrett. I like a lot of the stuff you brought, especially as a relationship coach and your experience with other couples. And then Jay, you always have good things to say, especially when it comes to the dynamics between men and women, which is a lot of what your book is about. I'm sure in that industry, you got a kind of an inside look into women and things like that. And now you've been able to take that experience and bring spirituality to it, which, kind of it opens up a different level because experience always adds to your knowledge. And so unfortunately, sometimes we have bad experience, but God can still turn it for good and turn it into good knowledge. So yeah. So thank you guys for joining me today. I really appreciate your feedback. I'm looking forward to see what the women who are watching have to say about this. And I really pray, and I know God will use this to really give some women some insight. If any of you want to reach out to Jay about his book, the link for his book should be either above or below this post. And the same thing for Garrett. If you guys anybody is wanting to reach out to Garrett about his book and his relationship coaching services, the link will be above or below this post as well. So thank you again for tuning in to Outside the Box. I will be back in 2 weeks with another topic to help you see that God is bigger than your own boxes. So have a good night or good weekend.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.